Hey everyone, Mr. Souther coming at you with a video on Unit 2, Lesson 3 for Code.org's Comp Sci A class. So let's get started. Unit 2, we're going to continue on with constructors. Lesson 1, we learned about the attributes that come with every class. And then for Lesson 2, we went through no argument constructors. That was the last lesson we did. And then now we're going to move on to Lesson 3, which are the parameterized constructors. So let's get started. All right, so almost always in the first module, we're going to go ahead and kind of run the code and see what's going on with the program. So, in this case, we have something called Mountain Runner. And then I know this is the main class because it has the word main in the second line there, public static void main string args, right? So that's our tester class. This is our quarterback. Mountain.java is another class just sitting here. It looks like it's going to basically give all the descriptors for mountain. It has a variable called name, height, has been climbed. Okay. Just taking a quick glance at this, and it's always a good idea. Don't just like type in whatever, right? IDK and run it. But take a look at the code, just preview it. That's the whole point of the first module here. So I see we have a no argument constructor called mountain. Obviously, as you recall from lesson 2, this matches the class name and the Java file. That's really important because this is what allows us to spawn a mountain object. And in this case, it'll be preset with these values. So for the name, default is unknown, height is 1,000 feet or meters, who knows? Probably feet, I'm guessing. Has it been climbed? Set to false. I'm going to keep scrolling down and I'll notice that there is a public mountain, et cetera here. And so this is also a constructor, but inside the parentheses, I noticed that there's actually stuff in here, right? In line 14, we had nothing. Line 23, we now have something. And I see that there's a string for some name or some variable called a name, some integer for a height, and some Boolean for climb status. Just to recap, string is a data type, so it categorizes for text. So when I run mountain, I'm ready to receive a text. int is for integer, so a number, and then Boolean, which is true or false. So I'm ready to receive all three of those. If those aren't available, then we will certainly just run with a no argument constructor, a default value. Looks like there's more of this one, public mountain string a name, int a height. Okay, so it's the exact same thing as what we had here on line 23, except I don't see a Boolean status. And in fact, it looks like has been climbed is still defaulted to false. Okay, and then there's this like random print mountain info thing at the end. Let's go back to the tester class, the main class, and just see what's going on. Looks like we spawned a mountain object called Everest. And it looks like it's called Mount Everest, right? And it's in quotations. And then the second argument here is the height of Everest, which is 29,000 feet, I'm guessing. And then has it been climbed is set to true. So then we're going to go ahead and run the constructor helper, which prints the attributes of the class or for the constructor. And then it looks like we're printing some other stuff here. Values assigned to Everest instance variables, and then they're using the print mountain info method from the other class to show what's going on. So let's go and run it. Okay, and there it is. So from last lesson, we did have this little constructor helper. Great. And in fact, this shows not one, not two, but three different constructors. Okay, and then it also shows the values assigned to the Everest instance variables, which is great. So name has a value of Mount Everest, height has a value of 29,000 feet, has been climbed is set to true. So it's all reflecting what's over here on line 4. Okay, so I can see that. Let's keep moving on. So again, the purpose of a constructor, which I want you guys to get, is it allows you to create or instantiate an object with certain like characteristics, which we call attributes. And then we use that object, having had those attributes, to like run certain methods and do actions. Okay, so in this second lesson, what they want us to do is just add the following code segment. I would encourage you to type these in that we can kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird to say, but feel out what the code is like. But you are certainly more than welcome to copy and paste it. I'm going to do it just because I'm trying to do a video and keep it, under like whatever amount of time I have. Yeah, I like to indent things. So I'm going to go ahead and put a comment in here Just I like to keep track of, from module 2, what they want me to add. Let's go ahead and take a quick look before I just move on and just run the code so I can see if I can guess what's about to happen. Okay, so what I see is we have another mountain object called discovered, and it looks like there's nothing in the parentheses. So this is telling me this is a no argument constructor. Right below it, we're running code.org's like pre-built code, the print constructors, which you should be familiar with by now. And it's going to look at that object called discovered that we just created. And then now we're going to print again the values assigned to discovered. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to hit run. What they want to show you is the no argument constructor here. And let me pull up the console. So before we had public class constructors for mountain, right? That's being shown again. We see Everest, obviously. And in this case, we're also showing what's been the values assigned to discovered. So they're just trying to show you what the no argument constructor does. It assigns the default values to that discovered object. Okay, so that's nothing new from yesterday, or lesson 2, I should say. All right, so we're going to keep moving on. And again, they want me to add more code. But my advice to you is, and my ask, is that you don't just like blindly start copying and pasting and then just not even look at the code. Because guess what? You're not going to learn. So go ahead and put in the comments from module 3. And now I'm going to copy and paste this. Do my indents. And it looks like there is some mountain object they created called Carry Jang. It's a new mountain object. In this case, they only have the name and the height. Cool. So we forgot about whether or not it's been climbed. Looks like we're going to print the constructor helper, et cetera, and then the values assigned to it. Now, if memory serves me right, over here on mountain.java, we had this like thing right here on line 32 where we are ready to accept a scenario where you spawn a mountain object or instantiate it, and you only have the name of it and the height. Well, what if whoever that person is forgot to put in whether or not it's climbed? No worries, on line 35, we got your back. If you forget to put whether or not it's been climbed, we're just going to set a default value to false. Let's go and run and see if I'm true or not here, if I'm correct. So print a lot of stuff, but the main thing to look at is this last one. Values assigned to Carry Jang instance variables, right? We have the name, the height, and sure enough, has been climbed is set to false. Okay, so we're going to move on. All right, so we're going to do a lot of work with parameterized constructors. These are not going away. This will be for the rest of the school year for sure. So part of what we're trying to do, or I should say code.org is trying to do, is just have you get more familiar with like what's going on here. What's the input? What's going to be the output? Okay, so now they want me to go to mountain.java. They want me to basically add the following code segment. So I'm just going to go all the way to the end and just say from module, we're on 4 now, and copy and paste it. I'm just going to check this. What it says is sets name to a name, height to 1000 has been climbed to false. Okay, so in this case, I have a constructor called mountain, and we are ready to receive a scenario where just a name is given. So it looks like the height is defaulted to 1000 and the has been climbed is set to false. I'll talk about name, a name, and height 1000 a little bit, so don't you worry about that. I'm going to go ahead and actually cut and paste this a little bit higher. It is a good idea. Do you see how there's a no argument constructor on line 14? And then there is a parameterized constructor on 23 with 3 inputs. Then we have 2 inputs here for line 32. So let's go ahead and put it right below that for the 1 input, just so they're kind of all clustered together. And I should be able to highlight all of this and just hit tab, and indents it. Maybe undo that. There you go. Okay, so I put that in. And then they also want me to, let's go ahead and run it just to make sure there's no errors here. And I'm not getting errors, so it's good. It's just printing all the stuff we've been doing. Okay, so then now they want me to add this code on the left into the tester class. So I'm gonna put from module 4. Again, the comments help for me at least to keep track of like when I added stuff. All right, here we go. So we have a new mountain now, object called Mutla, and it's a new mountain and it says Mutla Ridge, or however you say that. Notice that there is no number for the height and there's no whether or not it's been climbed. None of that information is there. So now we're going to go ahead and do a print of the values assigned to those instance variables. You've probably already guessed it by now, but it's only going to print just the name, right? Which is Moolah Ridge. And I take that back. We're printing height and has been climbed, but the default value is 1,000 and false. So that's that. So we're kind of getting a good flavor of or feel of like what's going on with all of these different parameterized constructors. All right, so let's go through some of these things. Again, I'll go through it with your composition notebooks, but you can certainly go through this. So let's go through kind of some of the things. So I guess I'll start from the right. Defining two or more constructors or methods with the same name but different signatures. That's going to be called overloading. I don't know why they call overloading. That's above my pay grade. But what I do know is that it allows for certain parameters. Like if someone comes along and creates a mountain object that only has the name, then I have them covered in terms of other default values. So one of those options for mountain, the constructor will work. Okay, so the value to assign to the formal parameter, we have the value to be passed to a constructor method, the attributes of an object that are represented by instance variables. I'm going off the top of my head. I think that's going to be state. The value to be passed to a constructor method versus the value to assign to the formal parameter. I'm going to say that's actual and that's formal. Let's see if that's right. Yeah, you got it right. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to do one, you do the other one. I don't know, maybe we'll do museums. Okay, so let's let this thing load. All right. Now take a look at what the to-dos are, and we'll notice that, I mean, we're again going to keep working with these constructors. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do to-do number one, which is we're going to go to museum.java, the museum class, and they want us to assign specific values to name and as nonprofit instance variables. So we're going to go through this, and what I'm seeing is we do have a no argument constructor right here where it defaults the name to unknown is nonprofit to false. Okay, so that's all done for us. Now what they want us to do is to be able to, let me just make sure I'm reading this right. They want us to write the parameterized constructor to assign specific values to the name. Okay, no problem. So this is how this is going to work. So let's assume in this case that our user provides the museum name, and it also provides the whether or not it is nonprofit. Okay. So for in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use we're in a museum, right? Public museum to go ahead and write that constructor. So let's get doing that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and use public, and then in this case, it's museum with parentheses and curly braces. So I'm getting this all started. What's going to go inside the parentheses is the important part. So let's check out the variables. Do you see how it says string name here and Boolean is nonprofit? We're going to go ahead and follow that same path. So when we run the museum constructor, we're going to go ahead and start with some sort of string, whatever, and then some sort of Boolean for the status of this thing. Okay, so I'm putting these underlines in now just as a placeholder. And then what's going to happen is we need to set name and is nonprofit to whatever is in there. Let me slow down for a second. So again, in the museum class, there are private instance variables of name for the museum, is nonprofit. Those are essentially storage bins that are just set up and sitting there. They are empty. We need to assign them values. The constructor is what helps you assign values to variables. In other words, if I have a shoebox for my Jordan 4s, when I go buy a pair of Jordan 4s, it's going to go into that shoebox. The box itself is a variable that's just created. It is empty. When I go out and I grab my pair of Jordans and I put it in there, I am essentially acting the role as a constructor. Okay, because I assigned a value, or in other words, in this case, put the shoes in the box. Okay, so for museum, we got that done. So here, I'm going to go ahead and bust out name again, and that's going to be equal to whatever the heck is in that underline. And then we're also going to do Boolean for is nonprofit. I'll go ahead and copy and paste that so I don't mess up the spelling and the syntax. Right? And I'm keeping these little fill in the blanks here for you. Okay. So the idea is when we run museum constructor with an input of a string or text and Boolean, which is true or false, it'll go ahead and assign that for you to those values, to those variables. Now, the thing that troubles some students in the past, when I did this last year, is they're not sure what to use here or why. You could just type in whatever you want. It doesn't matter, well, as long as it's not a semicolon, right? And the main thing is you're assigning some sort of name or label to what is this text that's coming in. In this case, you can use name, you could use string A, you could use Boolean B as my inputs, or string X, Boolean Y. It doesn't matter what that name is. I'm just gonna keep it really simple and just put A and B. Okay. So I'm gonna put A there and B there. What this does is when my user puts in a museum, creates a museum object with the name like Smithsonian and Boolean false, it'll go ahead and assign that to the name in this nonprofit. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this just to make sure I didn't mess anything up, right? So it's a good idea to use the iterative process and just check one at a time, one block of code at a time. No errors, great. To do number two, we're gonna go to Museum Runner now, and they want me to instantiate that object. Okay, no problem. I'm gonna delete some of these spaces so I have more room to show you. Okay, so we're gonna instantiate the museum object. Rid of the mouse. I guess they don't care what the name is, so I'm just gonna go ahead and bust out a museum object. So call it museum, Smithsonian equals new museum. And inside the parentheses, this is where the important part comes in. I need to put in the name, Smithsonian. I think that's how you spell it. The name there. And then I also need to know whether or not it is nonprofit. And the Smithsonian doesn't, it's a government entity. They don't charge people, so it is nonprofit. So I'm going to say true. Okay, whoops. I don't know why I have a curly brace. That should just be a semicolon, right? Because I'm not writing a method or anything. Let's go ahead and run it just to make sure nothing weird is happening. Okay, I see no errors, which is great. So now what I can do is let's go ahead and print the information about the Smithsonian object. Right here, they'll give it to you. So it looks like we're doing constructors helper. I think we're doing really what I want is the system.out.println thing they have here. So it's going to show me the name, and then they're using the modern art object over here on the left. So this one I'm just going to rename as the Smithsonian. And there's a get name method. We're actually going to talk about get and set later on in this unit, I believe. But so don't worry if you're not sure about what that method's doing. So let me run it. Okay, here we go. Name Smithsonian. Whatever and it's not, I also wanted to, I realized code.org is missing something. So we're seeing, let me just stop here for a second. We create a Smithsonian object. It's called the Smithsonian. When I use getName, it's printing you what the value of the name is of the Smithsonian. So we're seeing right there that that is being assigned, right? So this whole code you just created, it takes in, when you do museum Smithsonian, it's going to go ahead and take that word Smithsonian and assign it to the variable called name. For true, for Boolean, that's going to assign it to is nonprofit. All right. Now, what I do want to show you too down here is we have get name, and there's another method called get is nonprofit. Let's go ahead and use that. I think they do it later, but I'm going to go ahead and do it here now. And let's go ahead and do is it nonprofit? Question mark. And then let's do the plus sign, which is a concatenation. It just strings together different names, variables, etc. And then let's do Smithsonian object again, dot. This get is non-profit thing. And then semicolon at the end. Let's go and run it again. And it ran, and there you go. Name Smithsonian is not-profit true. So that's all there. All right, moving right along. So I'm going to test it, should pass it. And then we're done. Let's go to module 7. Again, I do one, you do one. Let's do planets, right? We have a student who's wants to be an astrophysicist. Is pretty awesome with planets and interstellar stuff. All right. Okay, so in this case, we have to instantiate planet objects. They want me to once again write a parameterized constructor to assign values to name, num moons, and has ring system. And then they want me to, so basically here's the gist. You saw it earlier we have the no argument constructor here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this to do because it's kind of annoying me. And then I'm also going to delete that because all these instructions are in to do's. And I also want to get more space for the code for this video. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the planet class, and I know that we have a couple variables. One is for the name, one is for the number of moons, and one is for whether or not it has rings in the system. Name is a text. Num moons is a whole number, integer. So it could be positive or negative, but let's just keep it positive. And then Boolean is true, false. All right, so that's all there. We already have this no argument constructor for planet, and there's my default values, which is great. Now I need to write two more constructors, right? So this is a parameterized constructor with three inputs, basically. What do I mean by that? So when our user comes along and spawns a planet object, we want it to be able to take in, what if they give us three elements or inputs, then I need to have a way, whoops, and last one is Boolean. I need to have a way of storing those values when it's given. Okay, so I'm just setting up the shell of these constructors. So that's with three inputs that are given. And let's do another one, which is the to do number three. This is the parameterized constructor, sorry, to do number two, with two inputs. So I'm going to do public planet, and then again, we have a string. So name of the planet is given to me. Someone told me how many moons it has, but guess what? It doesn't tell me, they forgot to tell me whether or not it has rings. Okay, so I'm going to set that up. And then to do number three and four. Okay, so we're instantiating and printing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to see what are the three variables that we have. We have name, we have num moons, and we has a ring system. I'm going to go ahead and copy these down here and do an equal sign. Okay, we got name, and then we have right there num moons. So I'm just going to basically copy that again. And then we have has ring system. So I'm just teeing all this up, right? Nothing's really, if I ran this right now, I'm going to get a ton of errors. Okay, so then what I need to do is just like in the last module we did, we have three inputs coming in. I need to basically tell Java, hey, be prepared. Someone's going to call a planet constructor, use a planet constructor to create an object that has a name, that has a number of moons, and that has a ring system. Now, in this case, I could just go A, B, and C. Oops. So that's totally fine. The only problem I see with this, just having done a lot of this, at least in code.org, is like you might lose track of what's A, what's B, what's C. It's just random things I'm putting in there. That's why code.org will say A name, right? Or B num moons, or C has ring system. Just so it's kind of like obvious, like what it is. To me, it doesn't matter what you want to call it. I use the name a lot of time and the num moons and maybe the rings. I don't know, something. It doesn't matter, but at least it gives some sort of like, you know, idea of what these are. Okay, so I can put that here, and maybe I could just keep it as A. Why not? And that way we can just, basically, in terms of Java, they don't care what you call these things for int a num moons or a rings. They just care about having a placeholder there so it's ready to receive a text. So essentially think of this as like a temporary storage bin that's going to go ahead and assign it to the actual variables we're going to be using here. Okay, I'm not going to run it yet because obviously it's going to come in with problems. And I would just copy and paste the same thing down here, just to keep it consistent. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy these two lines because right here I'm receiving name and number of moons. The only thing I don't have is that has ring system. And let's go ahead and default it to false. You might ask why? Well, because that's what we did here when we had no arguments or no inputs given, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and run it just to make sure I didn't like leave anything out there that's silly. Okay, we got no errors. That's great. So now I'm going to go back to planet's runner. And we're going to go ahead and instantiate that planet's object. So planet, let's just do Saturn equals new planet. I'm going to go ahead and run the no argument constructor, right? So there's nothing in the fields. I'm going to go ahead and run one where I guess we can't call it Saturn. Let's do Saturn has rings. Maybe I'll do Mercury. Uh, and my student could tell me if I don't know which planet has rings or not. Let's do Earth, right? We know we don't have any rings. And I'll use all three of them. So it's called Earth. What is the number of moons? We only have one. And then do we have rings? No, not that I'm aware of. And then let's make one more called Saturn. Um, and let's say that's a new planet. In this case, I'm just gonna, on purpose, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna say, I don't know, I'm guessing it has 5 moons. I'm probably wrong, but who cares? Okay, so I have these three objects printed or created, instantiated. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you. The reason I'm doing this is we all know Saturn has a ring, right? When we run this, I should see the default value of false. So let's go ahead and print these things. I don't care about the constructor helper. I'm just going to go ahead and do this system.out.println thing. So every time I spawn something, I'm going to go ahead and do the print if that's okay. And in this case, I need to update the object name here. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so this is for Earth, so that matches. This is for Saturn. So when I run this thing, we're going to get, there we go, name unknown, Earth, Saturn. Okay, so for the no argument constructor, even though it's called Mercury, there's nothing in the parentheses that's going to show unknown. Let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and use the same system.println, but instead of get name, that's just going to return the name of the planet. Let's go ahead and find the other methods because these are already made. Do you see how it says get num moons? Let's go ahead and use that. And then I'm going to do the whole system thing again, kind of like this. And you see how there is a method called get has ring system? That's already pre-programmed for you. I can use that method here. So in this case, what's going to happen is it's going to print out the name of Mercury, how many moons it has, and whether or not it has a ring system. Go and update these text here. So it's for moons. And then this has uh, does it have rings? Question mark. So that'll all work. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this down here. Instead of Mercury, I need to update to Earth. Instead of Mercury here, oops, Earth. Okay, let's do the same thing down here. And instead of Mercury, we're going to do this is Saturn and Saturn. All right, clear the console, run it. And you'll see, there we go. So first thing it runs is it prints the name unknown and it has number of moons 1. Does it have rings? False. Next one, you'll see right here, we did Earth, right? And I only gave it, I gave it 1 moon and then false for the rings. And it prints all that, which is great. Let's look at Saturn, which is the more interesting one for me, in that it did print the name Saturn. It printed how many moons it has, 5. And then do you see how it's like, we know it has rings, but it defaulted to false, right? Because that wasn't provided. So we can see right there that when we only have 2 inputs, it ran this code correctly, right? I've given it a name, I've given it a number of moons, but ooh, they forgot to give me whether or not it has rings. And so I set that by default to false. Let's go ahead and test this. Might get mad just because I did a lot of stuff there. What did I miss? They want me to assign specific values to name. No moons has rings. Okay, that's weird. Did I not do that yet? I did do that right here. And then specific values. Assign specific values to name and num moons, default value. Okay, so I think this is the problem. I got rejected here, and I think I know why. Let's take a look at, actually, I'm not sure why. Name, I mean, I basically have everything they want me to have. Sometimes you're gonna get rejected, and it's something specific they wanted me to do in the to-do list that I didn't do. So let me just check. What did I get an error on? I mean, if you pass your test, great. Maybe it's just a glitch I'm getting. But if you haven't passed the test, then feel free to just stay on this video. I know it's long, sorry. Then we assign specific values to the name, num moons, has ring system, instance variables. Failed. The test planet 3 parameters should not be null. Okay, that's a little bit odd. Maybe they want me. Oh, you know what? I bet you 20 bucks that because I only printed everything, they probably want me to do the constructor helper too. So let me go ahead and do that, and that should take care of this problem. So I'm gonna go ahead and just throw it down at the end here. One, two, and three. So we have Mercury, Earth, and Saturn. So this is just, it's going to print all the constructors for me. But I'm going to go ahead and test it and see if that's, because I didn't do that yet. I still failed. You know what? I'm not sure what it is, and I don't want to waste more of your time. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the video here, and I'll figure out what their little test is. But the main thing is we did what we needed to do from our end, so I'm happy with that. All right, thanks for listening.